So this is Baroness Jenkin of Kennington, who was talking about food poverty at a press conference in the House of Commons at the end of last year. And she has since apologised for these remarks, and I think her other work on food poverty suggests that she did misspeak. But I think that she's capturing a sentiment that is not uncommon, this idea that poorer people are less able to cook and therefore they rely on unhealthy convenience food, and that's one of the reasons why they're more likely to be obese than more affluent people. So we're doing a range of research on cooking and cooking skills and how this relates to healthy eating and dietary outcomes. And I wanted to use some of that work to explore this idea of whether poorer people are any less likely to cook or any less able to cook than more affluent people. So this is some data from the most recent UK time use survey. This is a population representative cohort of adults who are asked to provide information on what they were doing across one full 24-hour period. So 24 hours is broken down into 10-minute slots, and you're asked to say what your main activity was in each of those slots, and then these are aggregated up. And so one of the activities that people are asked about is cooking and washing up, and this is the data that we have looked at here. So men and women spend very different amounts of time cooking. So I've presented this separately for women here to begin with, and this shows for all women on the left-hand side of each cluster of bars, and then broken down by occupational social class of the household. So this is of the social class of the highest wage earner in the house, and it goes essentially low, medium, and then top. So we looked at three things here. The proportion of women who are spending any time cooking, and you can see that about 85% of women spend some time cooking in a 24-hour period. But that amount of time seems to decrease as you go from the lowest to the most affluent. So that's almost the opposite of what Baroness Jenkin was suggesting. Then we looked at the proportion of people or of women who are spending 30 continuous minutes cooking, which we thought might be the absolute minimum you'd need to cook a meal. So this is based on the idea of Jamie's 30-minute meals. So you can get yourself a home-cooked meal in 30 minutes. And you can see here just less than 2/3 of women are spending 30 continuous minutes. And again, you see the same trend, that the proportion of women spending that amount of time cooking decreases as affluence increases. And then we looked at total time spent cooking over the full 24 hours. So for women, the median time is about 50 minutes, just less than an hour. And again, this trend that more affluent women are spending less time cooking. And when we adjust this for age and other things, it's this last one, the total time cooking, that remains statistically significant. And these are the data for men. As I said, they spend a lot less time cooking. So less than 2/3 spending any time cooking, only about 1/3 spending enough time to make a meal, according to Jamie Oliver. And the median time that men spend cooking is just 10 minutes, one 10-minute slot throughout a 24-hour period. So that is sad. But in men, you see much less of this social gradient, and it kind of flips about depending on what marker you look at. But again, when we adjust for age and other things, none of these trends are significant in men. So when we look at time spent cooking, we don't seem to find any evidence that less affluent people in particular are spending any less time cooking. So then I thought I'd show you this data from the UK National Diet and Nutrition Survey, which looks at how often people cook and how confident they feel cooking. So NDNS is primarily a very detailed survey of what people are eating, but it also collects some contextual information. And in 2008, they collected information on people's cooking practices and food preparation skills and things. So this data is presented similarly using household occupational class. And here, when you look at the first two clusters of bars, this is people who themselves prepare a meal on 5 or more days a week, so most days of the week, and people who live in a household where someone does that. So most people themselves, almost 2/3, are preparing a meal, and 85% of people live in a home where someone is cooking a meal on most days of the week, and we don't see any socioeconomic trends in these. But then things start to become kind of more subtly interesting when you look at what sort of meals people are preparing. So almost everyone can prepare a convenience meal without any help. So this is putting a ready meal in the microwave. Almost everyone can also prepare a meal from ready-made ingredients. And the example of this is dried pasta, a jar of pasta sauce, warming these things up and combining them perhaps with a prepared salad. Almost everyone can do this, slightly more common in more affluent people. But then when we get down to this issue of maybe cooking from scratch, preparing a meal from basic ingredients without help, still nearly 90% of people say that they can do that. But a social gradient is starting to open up so that more affluent people are more likely to do this. And the same with cakes and biscuits, but perhaps we're not so interested in that. So my conclusion from this is that whilst we do start to see subtle socioeconomic differences in the confidence that people have in their cooking skills, most people are able to prepare a meal from scratch, and most people live in a home and someone is doing that on most days of the week. And I think that probably my conclusion is that there's not much evidence to support the contention that poorer people don't know how to cook.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It used to be clear in 5 minutes. Does anybody have a question for Jean, please? It'll work if somebody comes up with a question.
Carol
So
Brett.
you can't ask another question.
No.
It's your own one.
So if you plotted this against the proportion of fast food eating, and I know this is changing every year basically because we're all eating more fast food or more ready prepared food, would we have, what sort of graph would that produce? With it by social class?
That's an interesting question that I don't know the answer to. We have looked at fast food eating in the same NDNS cohort, and we find that less affluent children eat more fast food, but not adults. There's no gradient in adults. But I haven't looked at fast food by cooking skills. That would be an interesting thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.